For more college football talk, specifically Fresno State, I'd like to welcome in the Sports Central team. You all know Scott Bemis and Julia Lopez. Now, we're about to begin another season of Fresno State football. There's a lot to talk about, guys, so we'll get right to it. Number one topic, Jorge Reyna. He takes over from Marcus McMaryion as the starting quarterback, who was named the starting quarterback in April. His first game is at USC. So, Julia, you're up first. How do you think he'll do?
I'll be leadoff right now. I think Jorge Reyna has all the tools to be the starting quarterback, and I think that he can lead this team. He's been with Tedford's offense for the last 2 years. He knows it. He was a student, and now he gets to put it into play, and I'm really excited to see him go out there. Scott,
USC is your alma mater. Do you want to point that out there?
You already did, Andrew. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Jorge Reyna, as far as the USC game goes, I'm sure there'll be some rocky points in that game. The offense may struggle a little bit at the very beginning of the season, but I think as he grows into the role, as the opposition maybe gets a little friendlier than USC in the Coliseum to open things up, I think we'll see Jorge Reyna develop into a very above-average quarterback for Fresno State. And who knows, maybe he'll even surprise us all, and because he's supposedly a guy who likes to make the big play out there, maybe he'll turn into someone who starts excelling at that position. But at the very beginning, I expect it to be a little vanilla with Jorge, and they'll probably, call the game to try to win a little bit more with their defense at the beginning.
You just saw in that video part of his play last year. He did see time in 11 games, but a lot of it was in sporadic situations. He threw that touchdown in the season opener against Idaho. On the subject of Jorge Reyna, he was also named one of the team captains this season, along with Netani Muti, Juju Hughes, and Michael Walker. What does it say about someone when their teammates vote them captain, and what do you think about those four being the captains? Scott?
Well, I think it's a great sign when it comes to leadership, and I think that speaks to what Julia mentioned, that Jorge is someone who's been in the program for a while. So it's not like you're throwing out a true freshman quarterback out there against USC. You're talking about a senior who played in junior college, has spent 3 spring practices learning Jeff Tedford's system. He was Jeff Tedford's first recruit here at Fresno State. So I think he's got the respect of his teammates, and he certainly is familiar with the system. So he's got that going for him, and if he shows up to play, if he likes the bright lights, who knows what could happen.
And I think when you have just the respect factor that Reyna has amongst his teammates, even the defensive guys, Josiah Haynes said, I love that guy, he's my dude, and I usually don't like quarterbacks. And yeah, to get a respect from him, I think that's huge.
With Reyna at quarterback, who's going to be his go-to target? And before either of you guys answer, let's put on the screen for everyone the production of Keyshawn Johnson. As we know, he left Fresno State as the Bulldogs' all-time leader in receptions and receiving yards. He caught a pass in 50 consecutive games. And last season, he had 1,340 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. Johnson was definitely Marcus McMaryion's go-to target. Who will be that guy for Reyna? Julia.
Darion Grimm, I think, has a really good chance of that. I also think Jared Rice, too, because he was always a good target to have out there in great situations. McMaryion would always find him. But I think Darion Grimm, this is his year. Keyshawn Johnson moved on. I think he's going to step in. He's the leader of that receiving corps, and I can't wait to see him out there.
Yeah, Scotty has the most experience of the guys returning, but a lot of young guys who could really, take that and run with it.
We talk about running back by committee sometimes, especially in fantasy football terms. I think this might be a receiver by committee type of year for Fresno State, as opposed to one guy really, jumping out and turning into a Keyshawn Johnson. I think we'll see a lot of guys incorporated into the mix, and I think you'll see the running backs and the tight ends be involved because that is a strength with Ronnie Rivers there, with Jared Rice there as well, and then don't forget about a guy like Chris Coleman, who made some big catches last year playing as a freshman, and now he's got a year under his system. I think he will make an impact, and you got some young guys out there at receiver as well, some Valley guys. I think Jalen Cropper sounds like he's earned himself some playing time through the course of camp, and there's a couple other local guys as well who might get thrown into the mix there. So I think we're going to be hearing about a lot of names at receiver this year.
Yeah, possibly Josh Kelly, the kid from Memorial, and Carrick Wheatfall, JC transfer, has made a lot of really good grabs so far in fall camp. Now, you mentioned the backfield. Fresno State is thin at running back. We didn't say that a couple of years ago, but injuries to Jordan Mims, Romello Harris, Peyton Dixon, even Ronnie Rivers had that hamstring issue for the first part of camp. Josh Hokett is back there now, again, to help with depth. How do you think Coach Tedford uses his running backs this season?
Me or Julia?
Whoever wants to go
Pointing at both
Scott,
of us. Andrew.
Go for it, Scott. You can even address the video that we're showing right now. Ronnie Rivers scored the most important touchdown of the season last year.
Well, I think Coach Tedford has shown that he really likes to use a lot of running backs, and that's why this fall camp has been a little bit startling, I think, for this program. The fact that they've lost two guys that I think they were counting on a little bit, to provide some depth there in Romello Harris and Peyton Dixon, who's a true freshman, out of Northern Nevada. So I think that means that Ronnie's probably going to carry a little bit more of the load than they anticipated going into the season. Also means Josh Hokett obviously will be back in there, and I think he'll get some carries. He'll be more of kind of like the power back, I think, for them. And Savion Johnson, who's gotten a few opportunities, mainly in garbage time or late in games, last year. I think he's a guy that is going to be asked to kind of step into a role this year, a bigger role.
Julia, what would you do if you're Coach Tedford and you know that you have a guy who's an All-American wrestler that you wanted to transition out, but you need him for depth? Do you play Josh Hokett? Do you play him in 4 games to potentially keep that redshirt year? What do you do with the running back position?
I think that they need him now. Like, they don't have a ton of running backs. You mentioned that they are very light back there. So I think that you need to play Josh Hokett. And he knows the offense, again, and he has that capability of trick plays, which we all love to see. And I would love to see him throw another touchdown again.
Well, he's thrown 2. Had he converted a 3rd, then Fresno State would have beaten Minnesota last year. You know he wants to play the Golden Gophers.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys, speaking of position switches, because we talked about Hokett, on defense, Michael Walker is now a linebacker. He's going to try to fill that void left by Jeff Allison, last year's Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. Allison left school early. How do you think the Bulldogs' defense will compensate for those losses and the losses of all the seniors like George Helmet, James Bailey, etc.? Julia, what do you think?
I think Michael Walker is going to have a huge year just because this is his natural position. Every time we talk to him, he just is smiling ear to ear. He's ready to take on that linebacker role. I think he's going to step in perfectly fine. I think he's going to bring the leadership that everybody's talking about that defense has already with Walker. And then you go to Juju Hughes, Jaron Bryant on the perimeters. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
But at some point, you're going to miss those guys and the production they brought, even though Fresno State does have a lot of depth there, right, Scott?
True, but every year in college football, you have to replace guys. That's just the nature of the beast, right? Guys graduate, and I think defense is going to be the strength of this team. They are really deep on the defensive line, especially on the interior of the defensive line. That bodes really well. You lose 3 linebackers, but you know what? You're moving Michael Walker over to middle linebacker, who I think is going to bring what Jeff Allison brought to the table, and maybe even a little bit more athleticism than Jeff this year. And we saw what Jeff could do as the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. Aaron Mosby is an absolute emerging star at outside linebacker, and you have Justin Rice on the other side, who's finally getting an opportunity. And then you have a couple experienced guys in the secondary in Juju Hughes and Jaron Bryant. And they're going to help those young guys, I think, get into the mix a little bit more. And so you're really solid up the middle. So I think the strength of this team this year is, again, going to be that Fresno State defense.
And by the way, Justin Rice, if you didn't see the story that Scott put together, head to yourcentralvalley.com right now. Great story on the Rice brothers. Who won the arm wrestling contest again?
I think Justin did. Younger brother did.
Yeah, but Jared is the older brother, said he's better looking, and he was a great older brother.
Yeah, Jared cheated in that arm wrestling contest. Yeah.
Good stuff, guys. We're not done yet with this conversation, but we do have to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk big picture, looking at not just USC, but the entire schedule. Bulldog Insider. We'll be right back.